Welcome to Voice Unbound, the podcast where silence is shattered, healing begins, and your true voice finds freedom in Christ. I'm your host, Laura Ard, and if you've ever felt like your voice has been silenced, your identity lost, or your confidence shaken, this is the space for you. Here we'll dive deep into stories of healing and the power of God's truth to restore your voice. Together, we will explore how to reclaim your identity in Christ and walk in the freedom He offers. Each week, we will share stories and conversations and practical tools designed to help you find healing, renew your spirit, and boldly live out the purpose God has for you. Welcome. Let's get started. Welcome to Voice Unbound, where I bring women on to share their voice. And God's given us such a talent and gift to use our voices. And many times we let that get taken away, along with our identity. And so this is a platform that is God's. It's His. It's all His. And I love being able to bring these women in and be able to share their stories. So today I have Renee. And Renee, I just want you to take us back and lead us through your journey and what's led you to where you are today.
Absolutely. Well, it's so wonderful to be with you. What a pleasure to speak with you. I've loved pieces of your podcast as I've listened to, and so many different voices that have come to life and really impacted my own soul. So thank you for
Oh, that's
doing that.
awesome.
Appreciate it. Yeah.
You're welcome.
Well, my name is Renee Bergman, and currently I work in a business called Megaphone Functional Health, which is functional medicine nutrition. And it was a long journey getting here.
Mm.
In many ways, I wish that I knew what it looked like to have functional medicine on my side through the journey of having children and then through the journey of having kids that were medically fragile and all of
Mm.
those pieces. So my husband and I got married at the age of 22. So we were complete babies and we met in college. We were both biblical studies majors. And right when we first got married, I got pregnant immediately.
Oh my.
And we were in seminary and it wasn't expected. But there was excitement. But I lost the baby very quickly.
Mm.
And what was interesting is when we got married, I really had this idea that I wanted to be the next Beth Moore. I loved Beth Moore.
Oh,
And
yes.
basically, what I mean by that is just I loved
Yeah.
to teach. I loved to speak. I loved to write. I wanted to impact the next generation. But I was also 22, so I didn't know a lot about myself and
Yeah. Yeah.
life. And so upon that first miscarriage, it was interesting what it stoked inside of me.
Mm.
What was intriguing is that it opened up this door of motherhood that I longed for that I didn't even know existed. I always knew I wanted to have children, but I didn't know the degree to which I longed for family and
Mm.
fulfilling that mothering call that had been
Yeah.
placed on me by God. And it felt somewhat confusing because I was in seminary at the time. We worked at restaurants. Like we had no money. We were
Like, we
servers.
don't have the money to have children right now. What is he
No,
thinking?
no. I mean, there were times that we just couldn't make ends meet, that we would go and do kids parties where I was a Barbie and my husband was a Power
Oh
Ranger.
my gosh.
We would make balloon animals. We
Yeah.
reflect back on
Yeah.
those early married years and they were, pretty crazy and fun. And in some ways I would die to go back to the joy
Yeah,
that there
yeah,
was
because you
all
were
of that.
having fun, right? You weren't even
Yeah.
thinking about reality of life at that
Yeah.
moment, knowing that you had to work and keep moving so that you could pay the bills. But I
Yes.
want to intercede a question here. So,
Yeah.
were you brought up in a family of, do you have brothers and sisters and all that, or how
I
was
do.
that for
I
you?
have two older brothers. They're pretty significantly older than I am. And my dad was a pastor for about 20 years.
Yeah.
And then when I was about 7, my parents, I didn't exactly know what was going on, but at the time, my dad had become a closet alcoholic
Mm,
and
mm,
he left the ministry and we suddenly moved to Hawaii for him to do a job there. And within a year, my mom and my brothers and I were moving back. My dad had had an affair and their marriage had totally blown up. Um, and then my dad really took a turn for the worst. He
mm.
became a drug dealer.
Mm.
So most of my life, I actually, because I was only 7 when this all began,
Yeah.
most of my life, I really only knew him as a pretty terrible guy that was,
Person. Yeah.
in drugs. And unfortunately, both of my brothers became drug addicts. And I have an older brother that has lived on the street from the time he's been 15, and
Mm.
now he's in his 50s.
Wow. Addiction
So,
is horrible. Horrible.
yeah,
And so
it
many
is.
aspects of it. And we had a situation happen last night right here in our own neighborhood. And
Mm,
I was nervous because I heard a gunshot. And right then I was like, well, that's weird in our neighborhood. But
yeah,
luckily that wasn't tied together. But then I found out the story because then I saw the house with all the police cars and it roped off. And this
yeah,
man had come from, I don't know where, but he was an ex-relative to that house, but he had overdosed.
yeah,
And I guess he was just trying to get help or something, but he did
yeah.
not make it. And addiction just, it's in my family, my
Yeah.
daughter. And they
It's
don't,
rampant.
yeah, it's
Yeah.
sad.
It's very sad, and I love my family. I have high boundaries with them because of
Mm,
a lot of that.
mm,
And I think what happened when I lost my first child to miscarriage was this desire for stability and for home
mm, mm,
that God had implanted in me that I didn't know how that was supposed to look, what that was supposed to look like. I was marrying someone who really wanted to follow after the Lord, wanted to be in ministry.
mm,
And I knew he was wonderful, but there was so much. We were so young, and I was so young. It's funny, I was in seminary at the time, and part of my program was that I had to meet with a therapist, for a certain amount of sessions before they would, okay you to move forward in your program.
right,
And I started meeting with this therapist, and it wasn't the first time I had been to therapy, but it was the first time in my adulthood where I was making the choice. I had gone as
right.
a kid,
Not being
but,
taken.
it
Yeah.
was it was my own doing, and she wouldn't approve me to move forward.
Oh,
I was so mad.
I
Man,
bet
I
you
was so
were.
angry. I was so angry. And now looking back, I don't even know what her name was. I don't even remember what her name was, but
Mm,
in retrospect, she saved me in so many ways. She saved my marriage in so many ways because essentially she said, "You're going to pause and we have to take a look at some of this stuff that's underneath the surface with
right.
your family. You did not come from a family that was stable. You
So
had
it was
a lot of trauma."
stable. Well, I mean, you think God probably put that in your heart, like, I've got to break this generational
Yeah.
thing here, this
Yes.
chain. I've got to stop it. But then I wonder if there was fear when your husband said, I want to be a pastor. And you're
Oh,
thinking, oh, wait a minute. I know
oh,
where that's going,
right.
right?
Yeah, it was really crazy, and people in my family, like all my aunts and uncles were like, "Why are you marrying someone that wants to do that?" Like, they
Yeah,
just
because
had
of
such
all they had
a
been
thing
through. Yeah,
because what they had seen with my dad and,
yeah,
um, you know, just a lot of the ways that my family wasn't supported, and in many ways, it's interesting, my mom remained in the church throughout my life,
that's what
and
she
so
clung to, right?
yeah, my mom has a lot of issues from all the things that she went
Yeah.
through. But interestingly enough, that was what really saved my life because I had people um in my corner and on my team from a very young age that were
Thank
with,
goodness.
that loved Jesus and that poured into me. I mean, I had a young life
Mm.
leader that just was so faithful and walked alongside me in some of the most amazing ways. I'll
That's
share
just
a little bit
I
about
can tell
those
that
soon.
tugged at you right then,
Yeah,
because those people, they just don't know, do they? And what
yeah.
an impact they've made.
Yeah, yeah. So, after I lost that baby, I went to the doctor. He said, "This is very common. It happens often." Um, but it stoked something in me. And so I began saying to my husband, "I want to have kids." And he was like, "What are you talking about? We're still in school." So, we kind of pressed the pause button. But once we had finished school and we had moved back to Arizona, um, I said, "I want to try to start having kids." And we got pregnant pretty quickly, and again, I had another miscarriage very, very
Mm.
early on, and I was just so devastated by it, I was so sad. Saw the doctor, they said, "It's not uncommon to have this," and so you just keep
Not
moving.
words you really want to hear, though.
It's so frustrating.
Make it so like nonchalant, just
Yeah,
common. Yeah,
yeah. It really, I understand that doctors, they deal with it day in and
right,
day out, but they
right.
just don't realize the
The impact,
pain
it's the
that a
pain.
woman is
Yeah.
going through. Um, so we got pregnant again, and this is, probably a year or so later. And at that point, I made it to about 16 weeks, and
Mhm.
we went in, and there was no longer a heartbeat, but things looked odd. And so I was devastated at that point. I felt like we had made it past
The
that,
point.
like, safe
Yeah.
zone,
Yeah.
and we had been encouraged, you made it past the safe
Yeah.
zone. Um, and upon when you're further in a pregnancy, you usually have to
Mhm.
have a D&C because
Mhm.
the body doesn't typically recognize it. It doesn't naturally flush it, and they want to make sure you don't have any
Yeah.
tissue. So you have to see two doctors legally that check to be sure there's no heartbeat before they, move forward with the D&C. And in one of the checks, the doctor said to me, or the radiologist, really, the person that was scanning me, said, "Do you have two uteruses?" And I was like, "No."
Not that I know of.
And she said, I see two cavities, which you would never see on a normal ultrasound unless you've gone far enough in a pregnancy for it to expand. So I had the D&C, and they said, "Well, we need to look further." And I said something to my OB, and he said, "The radiologist thought maybe there was something funny, but I don't know. Let's take a look, because I had just had the D&C, so I was still stretched out."
Yeah.
And he got in there, and he was like, "Oh my gosh, you do. You have two complete separate cavities."
That is
Um,
unbelievable.
yeah, it was wild. So it took us down this crazy road of seeing lots of doctors. I ended up having a surgery to try and correct it. And then they gave me the okay to go ahead and have another pregnancy. And so I got pregnant a couple years later and carried full term. It was really hard. I
Oh,
felt
I bet it
really
was.
anxious through that whole pregnancy, just a lot of
Because you
fear.
were just waiting. Oh, wait, I
Yeah.
got this far, but that's still not safe.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I would say that a lot to my husband. I just feel like the rug's gonna get ripped out from underneath
Yeah.
me, you
Yes. Well,
know?
how do I get happy and excited about this and doing all the
Yeah.
things? Yeah.
Yep. So I made it to 40 weeks. I went into labor, went into the hospital, and, like a lot of early first time births, things weren't progressing, so they sent me home. And upon being at home, well, while I was at the hospital, I was complaining about a certain pain, but they just said, "This is your
It's
first baby.
labor.
You don't know what it feels like." So they sent me home, and I sent my husband back to work because I said, "I don't know how long it's going to be. Why don't you just go to work? I'll go home and get in the tub." And as things progress, he worked down the street.
Yes,
"You
not so
can
far.
come and we'll go." Well, the pain didn't stop. So I called a friend of mine that had had multiple kids already. And I said, "But they told me not to go in until I was this, far apart and contractions." And she goes, "Who cares what they said? Just go."
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Um, and her saying that is what saved my life.
Mm.
What was happening is my uterus was completely rupturing while I was at home.
Mm.
By the time I made it to the hospital, I was fully bleeding out, and my son had passed. He didn't make it.
Mm-mm.
And called my husband, and the nurses stayed on the phone with him to get to the hospital because
He was a mess.
he was, a mess. And
Mm.
yeah, it was just the worst experience of our lives.
Mm.
I had the red rug pulled out. The rug was
Yeah.
pulled out. Like, I was afraid what happened. And it was only by the grace of God that I lived. If you look up
I
uh
have heard about that. I
uterine
just interviewed another girl that she said she was laying in bed with her other child and something said, go to the, well, God, she said, go to the hospital now. She's like, what? And she just kind of laid there. And again, he said, go to the hospital now. And so she called a friend, and she's like, I'm being told to go to the hospital. She said, then go. And
no.
she got there and she was rupturing.
Mm,
And they did because she went so quickly.
yeah.
If you had stayed,
Yes, they would have
mm,
saved him. So
mm,
much would have been different. And it was only, I mean, the wild thing was I was bleeding out, but because I was having pain, I was using my elbow to push on the side of my rib cage, and I was clamping down my
closing down. Yeah.
and I drove myself
Another
to
grace
the
of God
hospital
thing.
bleeding out, which was just like the grace of the Lord that I didn't move
Mm,
my arm a certain way, and I didn't start bleeding everywhere and crash my car. I
yeah.
just idea what was happening. And then by the time I made it to the hospital, they didn't know what was going on. They could see that there was a lot in my belly, but it wasn't in the right place. It wasn't in my uterus. And so they thought that my water had broken and I didn't know it. And I was like, I'm telling you, no, I'm not
There
that
is
dumb.
something wrong.
Yeah, there's something
Yeah.
wrong. Nothing flowed out. And so my doctor wanted me to deliver naturally. And my doctor at the time, I knew him. I had switched over to him because I went to college with his son and he was a believer. And I
Mm,
said, I am hearing an audible voice from the Lord saying, don't push. I said, I've never heard an audible voice from the Lord ever in my life, but I'm hearing the words, don't push. And he
mm,
was like, honey, it's your first baby. I want you to have this baby and be able to go on. I know it's going to be painful and hard to push him out and not have life, but I want you to have other, pregnancies that you can just have natural births. And I said, I'm telling you, I
you
continue to
know.
hear it over and over.
Yeah.
Don't push.
Yeah.
Okay, well, then I'll do a C-section on you. And he got in there and he said, one push would have killed you immediately. There would have
Oh
been
my
no
goodness.
stopping the
The
bleeding
bleeding.
that would have happened from the contraction of a solid,
Mm,
pushing out of a
mm.
baby. Um, and so just knowing that the Lord was so gracious in my life and saving me, I still had plenty of moments where I'm like, why didn't you save him and not me?
Yeah.
Of course,
Yeah.
as a
And
mother,
how did you, or maybe you have in this journey, how long ago was that?
he'd be 16 this March.
Oh my goodness, driving a car.
Yeah, I
You would
know.
really be pulling your hair out.
I know.
So how did you not go bitter and turn from God?
Yeah. Well, I will say that I saw a trauma counselor literally the week after I lost him, and I saw her twice a week for probably a year,
Yeah.
both my husband and I. And I really think having true care like that was such a critical element of being able to not allow those emotions to sink and not come to the surface.
Hmm.
Uh, in general, I'm a stuffer in life. And I think I probably would have stuffed, and then exploded, and then stuffed, and exploded. And I think that that was one of the big factors. And then I had really, really strong friendships with people that
Mm,
loved
good
Jesus.
Christian people
And
around
they
you.
just surrounded me and they let me be where I was at and they walked alongside me. Um,
Hmm.
so after we had Titus, my husband and I knew we wanted to adopt at some point, and so they didn't know if I was going to be able to have any more children. It actually was a medical mistake from the surgery I had had, and
Mm,
the surgeon that performed it performed the wrong surgery on me, and
mm.
um, I we didn't end up suing him. I've gone back and forth on whether or not I wish I would
Well,
have.
you should do.
You
Yeah.
always
Yeah.
struggle.
You replay that. Yeah.
I want someone to take the weight of this, but at the
Responsibility
end
of
of
it.
the
Yeah.
day,
Yeah.
it didn't bring my son back, It
Yeah.
didn't change what had happened.
Exactly.
Um, but it was medical malpractice, and multiple doctors lost their license. The nurse that sent me home lost her license because she
Mm,
had clear like signs that my baby was having D cells and all
mm.
these things. So it was a really sad, there was just a lot of sadness around it.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so we didn't really know what was to come, if I could carry more babies, what was going to happen.
How
And
safely that would
most,
have been for you and the
yeah,
baby.
and most doctors didn't know either. And so we started the process of adoption thinking it would take a long time.
Yeah.
But like God's stories usually are not the way we anticipated. I delivered Titus on March 17th of 2009, and my son, who you can see right there, he
Oh.
was born August 20th of 2009, came
Oh.
through adoption. And upon having him, we before he came home, we were just pleading with everyone that my milk would dry up. Would you please pray that Renee's milk would dry up? I mean, I was just a cow. I couldn't get rid of it. And here I have no baby to feed.
No
I
baby. All
was
that
devastated. I
sadness.
took
Yeah.
medication. I did everything. I was putting
Yeah.
cabbage on my boobs. I
Oh
did it
my gosh.
and it just wouldn't go away.
Mm.
And a friend of mine said, what if you started pumping? Like maybe you'll get
You're to
to
use this milk. Yeah.
use the milk. And so I started pumping and I met another adoptive mom who already had a baby, and I began giving her all the milk, and she used a supplemental nurser to nurse that baby.
Oh,
6 months worth of milk in, like,
wow.
this little short period of
Yeah.
time. I just had so much.
Wow.
And then Keen, we adopted him, and we were there the day he was born.
Oh.
So I ended up getting to nurse him with Titus's milk for a whole year.
Oh, wow. That is so
It's
beautiful.
such a gift. Such
Yes. Yes.
to do
That's
that.
beautiful.
Yeah.
And he's how old now?
He will be, 16 this year in August.
In
So we
August.
almost have a driver.
Yeah. It's a lot. Hang on. I've been through it 4 times. I know.
Yep.
It's a
I know
lot.
lots of people survive through it, but it really is amazing how much your mama heart just goes, "Oh my gosh."
Oh, this is your baby gonna be driving, and now they're just on their own because this is when they really grow up.
Yes.
You see the growth pattern coming, but
Yeah.
once they pull out of that driveway, you're like, there they go. This is
And
it.
and in many ways, you go, "Man,
You're
they have such a great head on their shoulders, and they're
yeah.
so great." And then other times they do things and you're like, "Oh,
Oh,
okay."
maybe we should think that over.
Yeah,
Yeah.
your brain is not fully developed,
Yeah.
and
Yep. They're gonna
so
make some crazy mistakes. You
yes,
know it.
I
It's
know,
coming.
right?
Yeah. Yeah. So you have the one?
So Keen was born, and then I ended up having a really incredible surgery that's only been done a couple times on people. A woman here in Arizona uh, took tissue out of my body and regrew it, and then built me a uterus.
No way.
Yes,
Oh my and you're the one that had 2, but
yes,
they
yep.
completely took
So they
away your
completely
or
rebuilt my uterus,
ah, with your own
and
tissue.
with my own tissue, and then I went on to have my daughter, who is now 11.
No.
She was
Oh,
just, an amazing, miracle as well. Both of my kids just feel like
yeah.
precious little
Yeah.
all babies are
So
miracles.
was the pregnancy okay through this one, the
It
girl?
was I mean, it was I was in the hospital all the time because they never wanted
Yeah.
me contractions. So, I was just constantly when I would had now my husband and I had moved to San Francisco, we were planting a church there.
Oh.
And so I was at UCSF and was with a perinatologist, and when I came in and told my whole story and now I'm pregnant, he was like,
Oh, me.
"Okay, well, I've never ever had a patient like you. So I'm gonna have very tight eyes on you and see you a lot."
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
we became very close with him.
I bet you
And
did.
a lot of time with him.
Yeah. Yeah. It's
Um,
so
and
worth it.
it was so worth it. And she was born via C-section at 35 weeks and was just perfect. I mean, she was a preemie, so she still
Oh,
was
yeah.
for a little bit, but
Yeah.
in the
That didn't
grand
take
scheme of
long.
things, all that mattered was that she was alive and breathing, and
Yes,
yeah,
yes.
and
Oh,
her
that
birth.
is so beautiful. I got chills just thinking about it. The birth and how God just allowed all this, the hard. There's so much hard that we walk through, but
Um,
yet the beauty comes and the
it
promises of God come because he promises good for us. And
yeah,
so he did that for you and you steadfast stayed in it, and didn't go bitter and I mean, yeah, you got mad. We get
yeah,
mad, right?
and I think that's how you don't get bitter, is I think you are honest with the Lord. I had
Mhm.
plenty of crying, sobbing, hysterical
Mhm.
fits on the floor or in my
Mhm.
bed that, "Why on earth would this be the life that you would
Yeah,
ask?
that you want me to live. Yeah.
Why am I having to experience this? Why didn't you just take me with him? Why did I have to
Yeah.
experience the death of my child?
Yeah.
I'd rather be gone," and then he would,
Right.
you know, help me through that but then you wouldn't have Keen and you wouldn't have August and
Yeah.
CJ wouldn't have you. And there's so much of the world that gets me because you're still in it. And
And your story. It's for so
yeah,
many women to give hope and, to know that no matter how hard and how sad it is, that there is
yes,
hope. And
there
that's what
is.
I love to share with women in relationships. I had a 15-year relationship that was so bad and horrible and
Yeah,
thinking I would never be able to find true love again or was I worthy of that,
yeah,
and God found said, "Yeah, you are." And he gave me the most incredible man that I have for 27 years, 28 in March. But, I want women to feel that. I want them to know that they're not unworthy of such goodness.
yeah. And that it's okay to be not okay.
Angry. Yeah.
had to be
Oh,
angry.
yeah. Me and God have
I
had some like you said, I
oh,
have walked my driveway just telling him, like, "Why?" When he took my
oh,
mother, "Why? Why would you take her at this age? I'm just now really we've always been connected, but, that each season, a little
yeah,
closer, a little more." And I was like, Why? Why now?" But
yep,
God has his reasons, and that's what I have said with my husband. People are like, "You're smiling and you're doing," and I'm like, "Yes, because I know who holds our future, first and
yep,
foremost."
mhm,
And I have released it and I told God and said, heal him here or heal him there.
yep,
I
yep,
mean, what else can I do? I can't change what's happening right now. And God wants to heal him. God will heal him. I have no doubt in that. But
yep,
it's his will, not mine.
yeah,
He knows my heart. He
yep,
knows my desires. And
mhm.
that's where we have to stay in that. And it's hard.
It is
It's
hard,
hard.
very hard. I mean, I
Yeah.
still have, it's been 16 years almost since I
Oh,
lost my dad.
still, I could see the passion in there. Yeah. And the hurt
There are
is
still
still there.
days the pain is so real. I'm like,
Yeah.
I've right back in it. But God has given me a lot of tools and resources and I have continued to seek therapy. I didn't stay in that intensive of therapy, after the first year, but I would say it took, I had someone that told me after losing a child that statistically year 3 is really significant, year 5 and year 8 were very
Hmm.
powerful. And I remember at year 3 feeling like I think I can take a breath normally every morning. I
Oh,
didn't
wow.
feel like I woke up just feeling
Mm,
like death
mm,
overcome.
yeah.
And I had a lot of joy in my life. I had a
Yeah, yeah.
beautiful baby boy who I just adored and loved. But the grief of still losing one was just so right at,
Mhm, mhm.
underneath the surface from the moment I
Right?
opened my eyes. And so it
That's
changed to year 3. And then I think at year 5, I felt like I had these moments of I could maybe go a whole day without thinking about it. And I
mm,
thought, that's an exciting thing,
yeah,
to not feel
yeah.
like overwrought by it,
Mhm, mhm.
for a whole day. And then
Do you
you're
think we hold on to that because we're afraid if we don't continually think about it, we're gonna forget?
oh, for sure.
Yeah,
Yeah, I remember thinking that often that, like, if I forget everybody else has
yeah,
absolutely moved on, then it
yeah.
means that he didn't mean
Mean
anything.
anything. Yeah,
Yeah, and
yeah.
that just wasn't the truth,
No,
he
no,
so
that's just our brain telling us that silly stuff, trying to
well,
keep
it's
us
part of
frozen.
survival. It's your brain's way of trying to
Yeah,
survive
yeah.
and trying to work through. And then I did EMDR. I think at like year 6, I went through EMDR, and that was really, really transformational. I went from being at a place when I would talk about my loss, where it would spiral me for a solid
Days.
24 to 48
Yeah,
hours, after I
yeah.
really had to talk about it, or if someone pulled me into a loss, trying to help someone, I just
Mhm,
couldn't
mm,
get out of it.
mm.
And EMDR really reorganized that trauma to a place where I was actually able to share about my story. I was actually able to talk with people about it, that I could say what had happened and not feel like I was right back in the middle of the
Of the moment. Yeah, yeah.
moment.
I
Um,
went through, I don't know if you've ever heard of the 180 method. It's a coaching program that I went through about 3 years ago. And it was teaching you to heal at the depths of the root, instead
yeah,
of surface healing
yeah.
and reconnecting to God. And
Mm,
I was one like, I don't have anything to heal. I mean, I feel like I made it through that marriage. I got into a great marriage,
yeah,
had some rough spells with, but I'm doing great. And I said,
yeah,
well, I'll just go through it because I adore the woman that had created this program. And I said, I'll just go through it for learning purposes. I think it'd be great since I'd got my life coaching skills and I wanted to learn more.
yeah.
Well, about week 3, 4, I'm like, oh, okay. This is
Puddle
something
on the
that,
floor.
yeah, yeah. I'm like, where did that come from? And she had us go back and sit with different ages of our life, and just it could be something good, it could be something traumatic, whatever that situation was. She started like at 3 and then 6 and then
Wow.
13 is where I landed. And I was
Wow.
like, oh my gosh, I had buried something so deep, had not
Mhm.
told a single soul. And I
Yeah,
lived with that all those years. And
yeah.
how? How did I do that? Kept stuffing it down. But yet, all I look back seeing decisions I made,
Mhm.
how that had impacted my decisions in my life. And my
Yeah.
word that year was freedom. And I
Mm.
had got so much freedom that year by releasing that, expelling it, knowing, okay, that's where I needed to heal. And now I can let that go and heal from that totally. Reconnected back to God, letting me know that I was okay.
Yeah.
At that age, I made the decision that I knew to make at that age,
Yeah.
me being a preacher's kid and all the things. I couldn't disrupt my dad's preaching, all I just never wanted to do anything against him or him know anything horrible.
Yeah.
But yeah, that was the most impactful time for me. And we're always healing. That it
Yeah.
never ends. That's something, God will bring you to a certain spot in your life and peel back another layer.
Yeah.
Okay, it's time to do some healing here. And then he uses you in that area, because you need to be impacting someone through that experience. And then the next layer comes back. So I was so blown away with that. I started just a year ago getting my certification in the 180 method so
Mhm.
that now I'm a coach of that to help women use their voice and find their identity in Christ,
I love
and reconnect. Because again, the self helps are great, but they surface heal. They
Mhm.
don't take you to the depths of where you need to heal. And as women, I know men do this too, but more so with women, I think we're good at packing stuff away, right?
Well, and we've been designed as multitaskers, right?
Yeah.
And so as a woman, especially when you have a family and you're trying to work a
All
job,
the
you're
duties.
doing things, you are trying to navigate so many different pieces that I think it's easy to let things get stuffed and
Mm-hmm.
trapped inside the body. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, that really is what eventually led to what I do as a job is my body began holding all of this stuff and I got really sick. Well, first of all,
Mm.
when Teen came home, he was medically fragile. He had had a lot of exposure. And so there was just a lot that we had to do. He had a really rough first 5 years. Um,
Mm.
and I was constantly fighting the medical system that would say, "Oh, well, he just needs a feeding tube." And I'd say, "But why does he need the feeding tube? If you can't tell me the reason why,
That
I
he's
don't
going to
want to
cover
set
it
him
up.
up for
Yeah.
his whole life to be on
Yeah.
this." So we began, seeking more holistic methods, and it took me down this really interesting route of my own healing with him, of doing
Mm-hmm.
natural remedies, seeing different practitioners, and then by the time my daughter was about 3, my body just began to give out. I think I had held so much trauma. I had had so much that had been stored within my cells
Mm-hmm.
that my
Mm-hmm.
body began to shut down. And I was waking up with, I'd look like Quasimodo. My face would just be gigantic and swollen, and they couldn't figure out what was going on. And I saw doctor after doctor, and I finally landed at a center down in Arizona that treats things from a natural perspective. And
Mm.
they thought that I had beginning stages of lymphoma. That's what I was being diagnosed with. And upon getting down there and doing all these different functional labs, lots of different testing, asking hours and hours of
Of
questions
questions.
of what had happened in my life, um, it came down to severe trauma that was in my body. And I had dental implants that I had had for almost 20 years. That number one, I was allergic to the metal that was within
Yeah.
them. And then while we were living in San Francisco, we were doing a lot of ministry to people that lived outside. And we would let a couple of our outside friends that we were close with and my husband, was in relationship with, so we felt safe with them. When he was home, he would let them come in and shower.
Mm.
And I picked up an infection from the shower that went into one of those cavities.
Cavities.
And it spread all into my lymphatic system and was mimicking. Well, I was at a stage 1 of lymphoma, but
Yeah.
lymphoma is weird because it's an autoimmune disorder
Yeah.
cancer.
I've read some of that. Yeah.
Yeah, so it's not until you're to stage 3 or 4 that they even
That
treat
becomes the
lymphoma.
cancer or whatever. Yeah.
Yeah. And so, I was like, "Well, I'm not gonna wait for that,"
Mm-mm. No.
And so we began, going down the full realm of natural healing. And so I had massive surgery, all these teeth removed. It was really painful. I mean, it
Oh,
was
I can imagine.
probably
So,
one of the
goodness.
most painful surgeries because I had to be awake for all of it because
Oh,
they
no,
can't.
no, no. You would have to knock me out.
It was terrible.
No way.
So I had like a 10-hour procedure done on my mouth of teeth being pulled and, my jaw being sawed and whatnot. And then I did a bunch of treatments through Invita. They're cancer and autoimmune focused, holistic
Mm,
practice.
mm,
And it changed my life. It
wow.
totally changed my life. I mean, I went from I could barely walk, my hips were so frozen. I was a runner in the past. I couldn't hardly move my legs. My face was just a disaster. I felt
Mhm,
awful. I would lay in bed thinking I can't get up and do anything for the kids. I mean, it was awful. We had someone with
mhm.
us, a friend of ours, to help us because I couldn't take care of our kids, to all of a sudden, like almost in an instant from surgery and doing some of their treatments,
You were
completely
already feeling
changed.
100% better.
Yeah.
Mm.
Yep. And I felt better. I feel better now in my mid 40s than
You
I
did.
ever felt in my 20s.
Yeah.
I think it's
Yeah.
because I had all this stuff building
Stored up in your
and
body. Yeah.
storing in my
Yeah.
body. So I went back to school for that. And that
Mm,
is where a lot of my passion came from, is watching so much of what Keene went through and how much natural medicine really helped with his gut and his nervous system and all the things that he had going on, and then how much that changed my whole life. So now I run labs on people to help them get to the core issues of, what's going on. And we talk
mhm.
about, we are a mind, a body, and a soul. You
Yeah.
cannot physically come to me and say, well, I want to run all the labs. Well, just tell me the protocols and not deal with the fact that there are
Yep.
mental capacities that are happening and soul realities.
Exactly.
And if we
Mm.
don't have soul hardiness, then
The
the
other things are out of
body
alignment,
will
right?
accept and
Yeah.
just fall apart.
Yeah.
We want to be separated out because, man, does it feel a lot easier.
Yes.
Not
That's that
integrated.
safety mode again. If we just don't have to deal with that over there, we'll just be fine. Yeah.
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 And I know when things begin to get out of control, even in my own personal emotional life, right? Like I've had some really hard things with family members lately.
Mm.
And I watch, all of a sudden I will have this like flare up of my body is just not
Reacting.
100% run as hard. I can't, be as functional with the kids. And I have to go, okay, what are the things I need to do? I'll meet with
Mm.
my spiritual director. I spend time in prayer. We always say, oh, it's juice time for mama. I always have like this, like I begin doing whole juices for myself with
Mm.
tons
Mm.
of flooding myself with tons of greens and tons of veggies and turmeric and ginger.
Yeah.
I know that just bring a lot of inflammation down, which inflammation comes from stress.
Oh, yes. I
Stress
know.
in all different capacities, right? The
I
body.
know. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I feel it and I know it's happening in mine.
Yes. And once you tune into it and you begin to recognize it, you start to go, oh, I know that's what's happening, right?
Mm.
And sometimes you still need someone to walk alongside
Mhm.
you and say, let
Mhm.
me help you. And that's so important. You need to have those things. But it is amazing once you learn your own body, how much you can bring a lot of self-healing by acknowledging how those worlds are collapsing into each other,
Mhm.
and they
Mhm.
all have to stack appropriately.
Right. I think a lot of people are afraid because they think they've got to listen to the doctor. The doctor knows most of all. This week we experienced my great grandson had to go and get his shots.
Mm,
And Kenzie kept saying, Grandma, I don't want to do these shots. And I said, then don't do them. But then the school says he can't come if he doesn't have it. And all that fear put in her. Well, now all week he has done nothing but react to those shots. His face was so swollen, his broke out all over his body. And she's been to the hospital twice. And finally they put him on Benadryl last night. And I'm like, don't ever do another one. Just don't. If that's what your heart's telling you and not to do it, don't do it. Back in my day, we didn't know better. We did them. Same thing. The fear was in us that if you don't do it, they can't go to school, they can't do this, they can't do that. And then, another person's telling her, well, what if he got that disease? That's what they're putting in his body. I mean, come on. So it's been a hard week for her to watch her son and him not be himself. And I'm thinking, what if this is given something lasting that can affect him?
yeah.
Because how he reacted to that. 4 shots. So
Yeah.
it's been I just want to encourage her to know that she doesn't have to do this and the steps to take, to stand up for her child.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, if she ever needs some tips on how to kind of detox some of
Yeah.
that, you can
I'll
I'll
be
I'll
talking to
give
you
her
about
those
that.
tips.
Yes.
She doesn't have to
Bec-
hire me. She can just
Yeah.
I'll send her some
Yeah.
things.
Yeah, because she needs
And I
that,
want
and
to be
being young herself too, it's her, her first, and he's 4. He's 4 years old, and he's spunk, and he's laid around all week, and I'm
yeah,
just like, "No," and he's been up all night, couldn't sleep, miserable. She's like, "This just isn't right. This is not right," and I'm like, "No, it's not. It's not
yeah,
right." And the first time she went to the hospital, they kinda just brushed it off and said, "Give him." They gave him probably shouldn't be talking about this, but they gave him Zofran. I'm like, "Is he sick? Throwing up?" She's like, "No." Then do not give that to him. I mean, I was all over her. I was like, "Why would they have given you that? Why?" It just doesn't make sense, but I know there's
it
proper
does make
places and
sense in
time.
a world where we've been taught that band-aids are what fix wounds.
Yes.
Band-aids don't fix wounds. Wound care fixes wounds,
Yeah.
right? Like
Yes.
you can't stick a band-aid over a third
And hope
degree
it goes away.
and
No.
hope it goes away. You have to
No.
treat it and you have to treat it well and you have to put silver on it and you have to make sure that the skin begins to grow back appropriately. That is the same thing that happens internally for us on physical levels. Our
Mhm.
mitochondria get damaged by a lot of the things that we get, exposed to. So
Mhm.
toxins that are in our water and in our air and in our homes and in our
Yes. Our
furniture,
whole environment. Yes. Yes.
our
All the
skincare
time.
products and our shampoos and all of those things. And our mitochondria, they get wounded. And what we do is we're told we should just take a pill and that
Mhm.
will fix it. But
Mhm.
it's not, it's a band-aid. And so it's still oozing out the sides. So we
Yeah.
have to back up and go, how do we heal those
Those
wounds
areas.
that are within
Mm.
us so that the body can continue to self-heal? It was
Mhm.
designed, God
Oh,
designed
yeah, God created it
it.
that way, right? That's the
Yes.
thing. I don't go probably once a year to the doctor just for the physical thing. Whatever, check my blood work. And the last time I was there, he's like, "I have to do all these things because I know I'm not going to see you. I can't get you in here." And I was like, "That's the whole point. I don't want to come here because when I do, that's when you decide I need something else or I need this or I need that." And I'm like, "No, as long
And
as
there
I'm
is
walking and
a time and a
feeling good."
place, right?
Yeah.
There's a time and a place for
Yes.
medication.
Oh, yes. Yes.
And I oftentimes work hand in hand with doctors when I'm working with someone. I work with cancer patients, so I have to work hand in hand with
Yeah.
doctors.
Yeah.
I have a lot of autoimmune disease patients that they've had to go on these life-saving
Hmm.
medications. But what's amazing is when you begin to heal some of the
They can
underlying,
start coming off some of
they can
that
start
stuff.
coming off of
Yes.
it, have less, need for more medications because
Mhm.
they're
'Cause
on.
that's usually what happens, it just keeps increasing. Yeah.
Yeah, they stack up, and
Mhm.
that's where the frustration lies for me, is if a doctor doesn't ask those questions. It's interesting to see what happens when you post things on, like, social
Yeah.
media, how people respond, and I
Yeah.
said, "If your doctor isn't asking you about sleep, diet, exercise, structural issues, or toxins in your environment, and then just handing you a pill, you have a drug dealer, not a doctor."
I bet that didn't go over well.
Some people respond pretty intensely to that,
Yeah.
and I say, "Well,
Yeah.
tell me, if you're not having someone that's looking at you as a whole person,
Mhm.
how is that a positive thing in our
Right.
life?
Right.
Not, because
It's
there's so
not.
much more going on. Now, I have gone to doctors when they are willing to ask all those questions and we talk about all of it, and they say, "You still need to be on this." And I'll say, "Okay, then I will trust that and believe that that's something that can help make steps towards maybe not
Mhm.
medication or only needing a small amount."
Yeah, not a
And
full amount.
trusting in that there's a continuation of care, not just handing of medication and then walking away.
Yeah,
I
yeah, and
experienced
just
that with
keep you on it and check back in 3 months, and we'll see
yes.
if we need to increase or whatever. Yeah,
Yeah.
I years and years ago, I was in a wreck, someone hit us from behind, and of course, I started hurting like crazy, and I went to the doctor. Well, the first thing I got labeled with was fibromyalgia. And then
Mhm.
I got put on 5 medications. Boom, just like that. And I'm like, "What the heck?" And then I thought, "Okay, I gotta do this because I need to feel better. I don't feel good. I hurt all the time." And then I had thyroid. And when I met my husband, I was like, "I'm done with this medicine. I don't wanna be on these pills." So I stopped and started taking myself off of 'em and went back to a new doctor. And I said, "Check my thyroid." He said, "Well, you're just barely. Let's adjust your dosage." Okay. Well, that made me wacky. So I said, "Take me off completely because it's not working."
Mm.
And he said, "Okay, as long as you promise to keep a check on it." And I said, "I will, no problem, because I have nodules too, and we're supposed to check those." And I have been off that for 28 years. I've
Yeah.
not been on thyroid, and I keep a check on it. I mean, and it was perfect last time, that I had
Yeah.
it checked. So you have to listen to your body. You have to stand up for yourself and not be afraid to say, "Wait a minute, something don't sound right here."
And I think remembering that a doctor is not inside your body. A
Right.
functional nutritionist, I'm not inside your body. Only you are.
Mhm.
And we were made with individualistic DNA. We were made with, yes, there's a lot of functionality that's similar, but there are a lot of structural things that have little tweaks that are different. We all have
Yeah.
pieces of the fall within us.
Right. Right.
Right? And so those broken pieces of DNA look different in everyone. And so if someone doesn't say some of those things, even for me, being, a root cause detective, sometimes we can miss things if people don't tell me how they're
Talk
feeling
enough about it.
and
Yeah.
talk enough about symptomology. Or
Mhm.
I'll be, going down a line with someone and all of a sudden they'll say something, yeah, I went to the OB and they said blah, 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 blah. I'm like, okay, wait, let's back up there.
Wait. Yeah.
Like we gotta you have to remember all your systems are connected. Okay, let's
Mhm.
back in. This just happened with a client recently that said, we were dealing with an autoimmune disease and we were going down this road and all of a sudden she said, well, I needed to take an antibiotic for a BV. And I said, wait, were you tested positive for BV? No, I never got a positive for it. I said, okay, let's back up. Let's ask some more questions because this lane over here of this autoimmune disease is connected over here to what's going
Mhm.
on psychologically
Mhm.
and what is expressing itself. Let's figure out those dots and put them
Right.
together and put
Definitely.
together even a more holistic protocol to help bring healing.
Mhm.
But she had just been told this is a normal thing. Lots of women in their 40s get BV and feel uncomfortable.
It's
Just
just like,
because it's normal
What?"
doesn't mean that it's okay.
Oh, no, exactly, it's not okay, and that's what we
Mhm.
have to keep saying, it's not okay. Oh my goodness, it's a lot of work to be done, and educating people and continue educating people, and so I will definitely have all this in our show notes so that people can
Wonderful.
connect with you and
Yeah,
find out what this is about, and learn. I'm sure that you have calls where you'll talk to them and explain it and okay, and go over it
yeah,
that because some don't understand, holistic or what it is, and I love your name. I love it because that means I am shouting it from the
that's
rooftops.
right.
But
And
yeah.
your body is a megaphone. That's a lot of
Yes.
where that came from.
Oh,
And so
cool.
it will tell you what it needs. You just have to listen.
Listen. And
And
another
this
thing women do, ignore, ignore, ignore.
yeah,
Right?
right. And it's so easy. You can have, the needs of your children and your parents,
Mhm. The
your
wife, all the
husband,
things,
and
right?
all the things can just stack up and you don't listen to what's going on in your own body. But it's like the airplane analogy. You got to put your own mask on first before you put
Yeah.
the other people's
Yeah.
mask. And if you
So
don't,
important.
eventually you give out. And
Mhm.
you know that as a caretaker, you have to take
Mhm.
care of
Yeah.
yourself. Why
Yeah.
you're saying I still have to do life-giving things while I care for my
Yes.
husband because
Yes.
that helps my soul to be able to care for him even
Right?
more effectively and to not be completely drained and collapse as well.
Yeah, that's why I go to bed earlier. I am
Mhm.
sleeping, which is I'm so thankful for. I do wake up some, but I'm able to go right back and just knowing that my body needs to rest for
Yeah.
what's to come because I
Yep.
don't know. Every day is
You don't.
unexpected. We don't know. So, I do thank God for that sleep because I would be not able to function if I didn't have decent sleep.
Yeah.
As we're talking, I have scripture cards that I love to just shuffle, and then whatever's on top is our scripture for
Mhm.
today. So it
Love it.
says, Be steadfast, immovable, always abounding in the work of the Lord, knowing that in the Lord your labor is not in vain. 1 Corinthians 15:58.
Mm.
So
What
what
a
you're doing is not in vain. It's for
yeah.
him and for many women that'll be impacted by you staying in obedience to him and helping women through these things. So tell me something that you like to collect.
Something I like to collect. That's a good question. I love collecting running clothes. Is that a weird one?
I love it.
The
More
other
than
day
enough, right?
the other day I went through the drawer of all my running stuff
Oh
and I was like,
no.
"Oh, that's a lot." But
Yeah.
I love running, so I
Yeah. So it's a big part of your life. Yeah. So you did get back to running and you love it. Yeah.
I love running. I run a half marathon every year. I love training
Ah,
season. I love having running partners. I always choose to run with someone, not because we're the same, speed or
Yeah.
abilities,
Yeah.
but because we can preach to each other while we
Yeah.
run. It's one of
Yeah.
the
Lift
things.
each other up and encourage and do. Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
thank you so much for being on my podcast today. It was such a joy to talk with you and share your story, as hard as it was. I just appreciate you.
Yeah. Thank you so much. I appreciate what you're doing, and blessings on you and your husband
Thank you. I
as he
appreciate that.
transitions to meet Jesus. I know that
Yeah.
those are hard, but what a glory,
Yes.
right?
Yes. Beauty.
Beauty amongst ashes.
Hmm. Thank you for listening to this episode of Voice Unbound. My prayer is that it inspired you to begin your healing journey and reclaim the voice God has given you. If you're seeking deeper support, I'd love to connect with you. Schedule a complimentary call at voiceunboundcoaching.com, and together we'll explore how you can step into the freedom and identity Christ has for you. Until next time, remember, your voice matters, and through Him, it can move mountains.